Welcome back everyone to this final episode of the 530 KO that I've been reviewing with you guys. And as you can see, we are on the final table. Big blinds 25k, we are chip leading with 2.6 million, so roughly 100 big blinds. And everyone else has, these two guys have roughly 25 big blinds, and then everyone else has 30 big blinds and above. Most of them pretty deep, around 40-50 big blinds. So we're in a pretty big lead here, and pretty good situation, obviously, with a lot of bounties to accumulate. So we're gonna see what's gonna happen in this episode. First hand, ace-9 suited in the cutoff, under the gun 1 opens on the 9-handed table, and I think this is debatable whether we could 3-bet or call. Generally, I think we want to put a lot of pressure on the mid stacks, especially with 2 or 3 stacks being shorter than the opener. I feel like this is an okay spot to do both, so I think 3-betting is fine, I think flatting is fine. I think personally, I prefer flatting because I don't think either the big blind or the button are going to play very aggressively, nor can the small blind shove very aggressively. So I think flatting actually makes a lot of sense. I think in this case I decided to 3-bet, which I'm also fine with. I think sizing wise, fine to go around 2.9x, 3x-ish, around 42 big blinds deep. And under the gun 1 decides to 4-bet. Not much we can do here, and that's also one of the reasons why I don't really like 3-betting that much, but I don't think his 4-betting frequency is going to be overly high, so I think 3-betting is pretty good here, but of course against the big 4-bet size we are going to let it go. Next hand we're going to take a look at is ace-king suited a couple hands later in the big blind. And in this scenario MP opens, and I think this hand is a pretty clear 3-bet. Sizing wise I went 5x. I think that handcuffs him quite well, and if he wants to put in a 4-bet he has to put in a decent amount of his stack. So as I'm pretty polar, I think 4-betting or 3-betting with a pretty big size here is best, and he decides to click it back to 500k. I don't see a lot of merits in calling, to be honest, just because of the small SPR, and therefore I went for the shove, and he folds, so that's pretty nice. Pretty big pot here without any flop. Next hand we get pocket kings right away, and MP opens, and the button decides to 3-bet to around 3.1x, 3.2x. Pretty clear 4-bet here. The question is whether we want to 4-bet shove or whether we want to 4-bet with a non-all-in size. I feel like given how aggressive we've been playing from the start of the final table onwards, I feel like 4-betting non-all-in has a couple of merits here, and we also have a hand that plays pretty well with a small SPR because you can pretty much stack off on any flop anyways, most flops, and therefore I think I went for the non-all-in sizing, but I think it's quite debatable because I'm really polar in that spot, but I think it's fine. Sizing wise, I think you have to go really small if you want to 4-bet a non-all-in size, and I wouldn't have a hand like ace-king in my range like that anyway, so I'm not really afraid of getting called overly much, and therefore I can use a really small size. Opener folds, and the 3-better calls. SPR now is around 1, so on most flops our strategy is gonna be to just bet really small, and there's a couple of flops where I would have a wide checking range, but not on this one, because I feel like even on an ace-high board, we still have a couple of ace-x bluffs in our range, and then aces and kings and maybe queens are in our 4-betting range for value. So we really only have kings and queens that miss here, so I think a small c-betting size with our whole range should do the job just fine. So I'm going for a really small bet here. I think I can probably go a little bigger, but I think this is still fine because this is a board structure where the 3-bet is going to fold a lot still, so I think this is quite fine. Button calls, not overly happy about the situation, of course, but it's still okay because I can fairly easily continue with this hand on a couple of spade turns, and then I can still hit a king or just get to showdown and win the hand sometimes. Turns of king of hearts, great card, and now is the question whether I want to be shoving or whether I want to be checking. I don't think betting is quite an option, just because the small SPR, he has 700k, pot's 1.2 million, so he has roughly like 60% pot, and I don't think that having a small betting range on a double flush draw board on this, even in a 4-bet pot, makes a lot of sense. So I feel like we should mostly split our range into checks and bets, and therefore I think I went for the shove here just because I don't block an ace, and of course I do have a bluff, like a high equity bluff sometimes. Like I can probably still have a hand like Queen Jack suited or so, but it's pretty close. To be honest, I probably don't. I mean, most of the time I'm just gonna have an ace, aces or kings, and I feel like checking here would probably also be a really good option, but I think in this case I went for the shove, and I think both options are just fine. Especially with my hand. If I had a hand like aces here, I definitely prefer to check, but unblocking an ace is probably a very big factor here to include kings in my checking and my shoving range. And he lets it go. So pretty happy with that hand as well. I think forwarding pre to a smaller size than nominal is debatable, but it worked out well. So. Alright, so one player busted, we are 8 players left, still in the chip lead with around 120 big blinds. Next hand, we're gonna take a quick look at this one. Queen 10 off, we're gonna open and everyone folds. Next hand, we have Jack 5 off. I think in this situation I would just want to have a really wide raising range. We're putting a lot of pressure on the middle-ish kind of stack, and we don't allow him to continue with a lot of hands by limping. So I think opening to a 3x or 3.5x is just fine. He does call. Flops ace king 10 all diamonds with the jack of diamonds. And I think in this situation, I just want to have a triple barrel with this combination most often, because I feel like I do block a lot of his continue range on pretty much any street, and I also have pretty good equity with my hands. So I think betting flop and mostly turn and rivers will just work out best. I think a small size does the job on the flop because he doesn't really have many hands that can continue other than pairs and flushes anyways, and to test out the waters, I think the small bet, even out of position, works just fine. On the turn now, I think we want to bet a little more polar to be getting in a good SPR from the river, and also to maximize our fold equity. That's around like 70% pot, and I think that works just fine. Calls again, and river we brick, but I think with this combo that shoving the river is still best. And he's going to fold a lot of plain ace-x, I feel like, and therefore I think our efficiency is going to be pretty good. We shove and he folds, so that worked out well, and we extend our chip lead.